Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, doing a Guy on Games review for Assassin's Creed Liberation. It's been a super long time. Every time I do one of these Guy on Games videos, it's just been months and months and months, because I rarely do, video game reviews. But lately, I've been going through my ridiculous catalog of just all games that I haven't played, but particularly Steam games. So if you got Steam, you already know how that is. And I was like, alright, well, where do I end up starting? And I love Assassin's Creed. Technically, I have like 4 unfinished games because I had Assassin's Creed Liberation, Freedom Cry. I just beat Unity, and last night I just started Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is super freaking fun. But yeah, I was like, alright, I got like 4 games coming out. I don't plan on getting the newest Assassin's Creed like day of, just because I got a million other games. Like at this point, it's normal life, where it's just like I'm just behind, so I don't really, depending on what game, it has to be like way up there for me to be like, I have to get that day one sort of thing. So I was like, you know what, even though I'm not going to get it, I'm super far behind. I've always wondered, what the heck is going on with these games, and I was like, well, I'll start with the oldest and just go all the way up to Syndicate. And starting with Liberation, it was really fun. It was actually, of course, it's the PSP game that was remade for consoles to be, Assassin's Creed Liberation HD. It is the first Assassin's Creed game with a female character. It's the first Assassin's Creed game with a black character as well as the lead. And I thought it was pretty cool. It was definitely a fun game. Of course, it's much shorter because it was made as a PSP game back when Assassin's Creed 3 came out. So, there's a little bit of crossover there as well. And I will be doing spoilers, but I'll talk about that, in like the second half of this video, where I get into like the actual story details. But it was pretty cool. The combat for Assassin's Creed stayed the same until Unity. Like, it was always the same. It was like, this does this, this does that. So all of that stuff is still there. The biggest change really that they made to how you play around with the character were the different personas, because Evelyn has 3 different personas. So you have the assassin persona, which of course was my favorite because you got to run around and be an assassin. Then there was the slave persona, which you would use during certain missions to help free slaves and stuff like that. And then there was the it may have just been called the lady persona. It was like her fancy one where she'd be in like a full dress and everything. And that one was made for, like, you could bribe people and stuff like that because she was a, fancy, well-dressed, beautiful lady and stuff. And it was like that, fortunately, actually, it's not demanded that you use that very often. It's, like, very rare. I think it was, like, maybe 2 or 3 missions out of, like, the whole game where you had to use that specific outfit. And then there would just be other portions where she would be in that outfit because you come out of a cutscene and that's what she was wearing. So then you'd have to go somewhere and switch costumes again. But that was, like, the one thing where it was, like, you can't really do anything in that outfit. Like, you can't, it's like, old school 1700s giant poofy outfit. So she's not doing like a bunch of parkour running up walls and stuff. So you walk slowly. I think you could fight. I don't really remember. I think you had like the most basic attacks. You could only use like your bare hands within that costume. And then later on in the game, you end up getting like another sort of defensive weapon with like this fancy umbrella where you can like shoot darts and stuff. And I was like, okay, that's a nice addition. Once again, that specific outfit is hardly, forced upon you in the game, so it's not that big of a deal as far as a constriction. But it's definitely one of those things where it's like, okay, it would be random moments. Like I said, coming out of cutscenes was the worst because you'll be in like your assassin persona or your slave persona, which basically function the same way. I can't even remember what the difference was between those two. I think there was something where it was like there's like a specific set. Maybe it was like the larger weapons you couldn't use in the slave persona, I believe. But for the most part, those two were exactly the same. And so I'd be in one of those costumes because the slave persona was definitely utilized quite a bit because you would be going into plantations and stuff as, as a stealthy assassin. So you'd be dressed as a slave. And that's how you get information and, kind of get close to certain targets. And, something would happen, you go through a whole mission, and then she goes home, and she's, of course, hiding the fact that, that's what part of the story is, that she's hiding the fact that she's an assassin. And she would switch into like the super fancy outfit, and then it's like, well, great, now I have to slowly kind of do that brisk walk to one of the changing stations to switch back into the costume. Sometimes it was automatic, where you would just switch right back to whatever you were wearing, and then there were other times, it was very random. It was like just some cutscenes, you would just be in the costume again. It was like, well, I definitely wasn't during that last cutscene when she switched costumes, and it was just like, out of nowhere, sometimes you would be stuck in that outfit, and then you just have to run and change. But it was very simple. The story I thought was pretty fun. It has like actual personal connections, which is one of the things that especially recently going through like 4 different Assassin's Creed games at one time. This story is definitely the thing I've been picking up on the most, where it's like, all right, what do I like most about this story? And this one I thought was actually pretty entertaining, and this is, of course, where I'm going to get into the spoilers. Overall, just for everyone who doesn't want spoilers for the story and everything like that, I'd say it was a fun game. Of course, it's super old at this point, so you can get it for insanely cheap. It was, I'd say maybe it took me like 6 hours or something like that. It was, like I said, it was made for PSP, so it's definitely a fairly short game. I want to say it was only like 2 gigs or something like that when I downloaded it. It downloaded in like, it was so fast. The download was insanely fast. And I was like, oh, but it was definitely a decent amount of time. The locations are definitely big enough. It's not like it's super tiny or anything. Like, you still feel like you have, an expanse. And there's multiple locations, I guess, before I get into official spoilers. You have the main city where everything lives, which is New Orleans. This takes place in the south. And of course, with New Orleans, you have the swamp. So that's one of the locations. There is a location that I believe was, I want to say it was Cuba, but that could be wrong. I think it was Cuba. There's like 3 locations, but they're all fairly decent in size, and you get different missions in the different locations you travel, and different people are set in those specific locations. So it's definitely entertaining. It's, even though it's one of the smaller ones, because of course it was made for handheld consoles initially, still definitely a decent, size map. And, like I said, 3 different locations, some of which you unlock as you, of course, go throughout the game, which, it's typical to Assassin's Creed, the block offs with the glitches and everything, and then it unlocks as the story progresses. But going into full spoilers, the story was fun. And the biggest thing about the story that I realized kind of came towards the end of the game, because as you're going through, they kind of build up this relationship over time with Evelyn and her assassin mentor, where there's a lot going on with her character. Like, she grew up basically with her father because her mother was killed a long time ago, and that was just kind of how she lived. Like, it starts off the game and it's her and her dad, and then it's her and her stepmother. And so her and her stepmother kind of work together, and they, she does like her thing where she hides that she's an assassin, but it's like, hey, here's, this random person that I said it would help, and her stepmother helps her out and stuff. And so as things continue on, there are issues back and forth, because Evelyn has to wonder if the Brotherhood is correct. Like, she gets certain directives from her former mentor, and she also finds out that he kept certain secrets from her, like the fact that he knew who her mother was. And I thought it was pretty cool. It's like, okay, so she has to go through this idea of whether or not the Brotherhood is always correct. Like, that's what she grew up with, learning from the Brotherhood. But she has to decide whether or not that's what she wants to follow. And during certain points, she doesn't. She kills people based on, certain ideas that she had herself, and she goes against her mentor. And I thought that was really good. And it was very interesting, because I was like, all right, well, this came out when 3 came out, which is, of course, before Black Flag came out, which is before Assassin's Creed Unity and Rogue came out. And I felt like this was almost the beginning of, like, the idea of them making Assassin's Creed Rogue, which that whole story is an assassin figuring out whether or not the Brotherhood is correct, and then ultimately becoming a Templar throughout the game. That's not really a spoiler. That's like the main point of the game, so that's not actually a spoiler. That's like literally the point of the game, is that it's an assassin who becomes a Templar. And that's a great game. If you haven't played it, it came out when Unity came out, and I think it got like buried because Unity was like the next console version of Assassin's Creed, and no one really played Rogue, but super awesome. And Rogue and Unity actually tie into each other as well. So if you've played Unity, check out Rogue. It's, once again, old at this point, but definitely a fun game. And with the way they did this, I thought for sure, I was like, okay, this seems like where that began. It was like, hey, we have this cool idea of an assassin who is going against her mentor. She's going against the idea of the Brotherhood. And then they have like the false ending where she actually joins the Templars, which at first I was like, well, that's crazy. I didn't see that coming. I was just like, poof, it ends. And I was like, holy crap. But then after the credits, you have that extra little sequence, and then you get the true ending to the game, which is, of course, her betraying her stepmother and actually killing her and stuff like that, which I thought was cool. I was like, okay, the stepmother's revealed to be like this main villain and stuff like that. And it was just a cool idea, and I was like, I feel like this is where the full concept of Assassin's Creed Rogue officially came from, was like this idea of an assassin trying to figure out if the Brotherhood is always correct. So I thought that was cool. One of the moments in the game, you actually get to meet Connor from Assassin's Creed 3, so I thought that was awesome, because there is a thing in Assassin's Creed 3 I don't remember if that was DLC or if they had that. I think it was like if you got like the a specific version or whatever. There's like a level where you actually play as Connor and then you team up with Evelyn. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then they do the reverse in this game where you're playing as Evelyn and you go up north to do a mission with Connor. So that was pretty awesome because it was like, it switches to Assassin's Creed 3 and it's like snowing and it's winter and stuff. And of course New Orleans is in the south, so it's like there's no snow in any other part of the game. It's like that one level she travels up north to be with Connor and they team up and it's like snow all over the place. And I was like, this is actually really cool. Like it feels so different to have that change, going in. Because Assassin's Creed 3, it actually went through the seasons and stuff like that. But in this game it was like strictly summer because basically that's all it is down there because it's in the south. So I thought that was actually pretty cool. And like I mentioned for the combat and stuff like that, very simple. They didn't really add anything special for this specific version, which makes sense, especially with it being like the PSP version. Totally makes sense, but you have pretty much all the weapons that are in Assassin's Creed 3 are also in Liberation. Let's say Liberty. But it was cool. I thought it was a fun little game, and I like the locations. I like the story elements of it with, Evelyn trying to figure out, like, is this right? Is this what I should do? Is the Brotherhood right? Are they always right? And I just thought that was nice. I was like, I like this concept of a character. Not, like I said, I feel like it was the kind of the seed that kind of created Assassin's Creed Rogue. So it wasn't necessarily, is the Brotherhood right or am I going to turn against them? It was just, should I be a part of the Brotherhood or should I just do my own thing? Like, she never wanted to be with the Templars because she knew they were doing horrible things, but she didn't know if she wanted to stay with the Brotherhood either. So I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool idea. I like that concept. But ultimately, I enjoyed the game. I thought it was really fun. Decent amount of time. Like I said, of course, it's a PSP game. Redone for HD graphics and be on consoles and PC. And it was fun. I definitely had a fun time with it. They don't have all the super extra unlockables where it's like you get every costume from every other Assassin's Creed game, which they still do even up to this day. It's like every main character has their own costume. So I always find that really funny. It's like, here's Altair's costume and Ezio's costume and Edward's costume and Connor's costume. They still do that even up to Syndicate, so it's really funny. But they don't do any of that. You do get to change the color and stuff like that of your costume, which I don't think was in Assassin's Creed 3, which is one of the interesting things. You could like change the color of the costumes. Probably should have mentioned that in the spoiler-free stuff, but as old as this game is, I don't think any of that stuff really matters. Where I place it is just kind of me just talking about the game, even though it's technically a review. But I thought it was cool. I was like, all right, I like this little bit of customization. The weapons being from 3, I was familiar with how to use those and stuff like that. But it was fun. I definitely enjoyed the game. I like the story to it. It does actually pass quite a bit of time. I think over the span of the game is like 3 years or something like that. Because there's one part where you like go to Cuba or wherever it is. That's like a 2-year journey. Like she goes on that trip and then her coming back, like they say like 2 years pass. And I was like, wow, that's very interesting. Like you don't really see the difference that much. But just knowing like, oh, there's that much time has passed and that's, you have that change. So I thought that was actually really cool, just how much time actually spans across just this one story. But pretty fun game. Like I said, highly recommended if you are a fan of Assassin's Creed. Of course, it's a smaller one. As old as it is, like you can get all the Assassin's Creed games at this point. You can get pretty much any Assassin's Creed game for super, super cheap. So, it's not a horrible game or anything by any means. So if you like Assassin's Creed and you haven't played this one, highly recommend it. It's definitely a fun game. You get a different perspective with, how they do the different outfits or the different personas and stuff like that. And I just thought the story was pretty entertaining as well. But, would love to know what you guys thought about this game. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, your least favorite parts about it. This is an interesting one for me. Going through with the 4, going through all the different Assassin's Creed games that I haven't played yet. This was actually very interesting to go back to because it was the oldest one out of everything I had. It was like this came out when Assassin's Creed 3 came out. And it was just very interesting going all the way back, even though, like I said, it's still, well, it's changed now as far as like combat and stuff like that. But at that point, everything was still the same. And it was like all the graphics, slight upgrades, but they all look the same and everything. But it was just very interesting going through it. It was like this was, that first experience of playing with like a main female character. The first experience of playing with the main black character within Assassin's Creed as well, or at least half black character. And it was just cool. And I was like, I like this idea. The location is very different. The story is not like this grand story like most of the Assassin's Creed games are, where it's like, oh, here's this character doing this thing, and here's all these famous people from that era, which once again, they even up to Syndicate, they still do that, or it's like, here's this famous person that lived during this time, and somehow the assassins, you know, are involved with that character. It wasn't like that. It really was just, here's Assassin's Creed, and here's a story. And I think this was really the first time they'd ever done that, where it was just a smaller story. This is before, you know, Chronicles came out, and I think there's like another mobile one, because they have like, there's one that's like a Russian guy, because he's on like one of the Assassin's Creed t-shirts that I have. I don't really remember what game he's in, but I know that, you know, it's before they started making the smaller games. And this is the first one, and I think they did a really good job going through, where it's like, we can just make a story of Assassin's Creed, and it doesn't have to tie into all these historical elements where they meet this famous character or this famous person. It's just, here's an assassin, here's some Templars, and here's that specific character story within the realm of this crazy war, you know, sent, you know, back in time. So I definitely thought it was fun, but like I said, we'd love to know what you guys thought about this game. Of course, with this game being as old as it is, you can just put whatever you want. You don't, I mean, I guess put spoiler tags before your comment. I don't know how many people would care at this point, but I guess for those people, I did decide to do half and half with the spoiler. So if you will put a spoiler comment, yeah, I guess put a spoiler tag. It's weird to think that, because the game is so incredibly old, and if you haven't played it by now, you just probably won't. But at the same time, I just did. So, you know, I think I beat it. That may have been like last month. It's been a minute since I've actually beaten the game, and I just finally had the time to sit down. Or I finally took the time to just sit down and do this, because I'm doing like all my little game review videos, because they're so rare and random. It's just like, why not? But yeah, if you're going to put comments, I guess put a spoiler tag before it. If you guys have any random questions about the game or anything like that, as far as, you know, any content or anything like that, if you're still curious, like, even with it being as cheap as it is, I'm sure, you know, get it like I did on Steam, get it on sale at this point, especially because I got it a long time ago before I finally ended up playing it like most Steam games. So at this point, if it goes on sale, it would have to be like $5 or something like that, especially with it being a shorter game and everything. It would have to go on sale and just end up being like $5, maybe $10. But I think it only costs $20 at this point anyway. I could be wrong about that, so definitely don't, you know, take that with a grain of salt, because I don't remember. But yeah, it's definitely a fun game. Like I said, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.